My husband and I were having big issues because of his sister, Mary, who had come back from overseas and started living with us 2 months ago. Every day, she would treat me like a servant, and the stress was really getting to me. I decided to talk to my husband about it, hoping we could find a solution. But he got furious and demanded a divorce. I thought that was an overreaction and tried to talk calmly, but he wouldn't listen. There's nothing to discuss. Mary can't stay as long as she wants, he said, which only made me more frustrated. This led to a huge argument, and Mary just stood by watching us fight with a satisfied smile. She didn't even try to help. 2 months ago, Mary had come back to New York after a divorce. She'd lost custody of her kids, which left her heartbroken. Instead of moving in with her parent, she chose to stay at a hotel to avoid their questions. She started visiting our house, saying she felt lonely. Then, one day, after I came home from work, my husband stopped me from going into my own room. "Wait, don't just go in there," he said. "Why?" I asked, confused. "I can't let my sister keep staying in a hotel, so I told her she could use this room," he replied. He had allowed Mary to move into my room without even asking me first. All my things were still in there. When I pointed out that he should have discussed it with me, he got annoyed, calling me petty and saying I should just make her feel welcome. Feeling guilty and unsure of what to say, I kept quiet, and he even told me to knock before going into my own room from now on. From that point, Mary acted like the room was hers and treated me like her maid. "You're late. I'm hungry. Make me dinner," she'd order. I would tell her I'd prepared something already, but she'd brush me off, saying she'd be playing games in the room, and that I should call her when the food was ready. Once, after I made her spaghetti with meatballs, she grimaced and said, "I don't like pasta. Make me a steak with full side dishes." It felt like nothing I did was good enough for her. I told Mary I didn't have the ingredients to make a steak, and it would take a long time. Then just order takeout, she demanded. I explained that I'd already made pasta for everyone, and asked her to manage with effort today, but she stubbornly insisted on takeout. Ignoring my efforts, my husband always told me to just go along with her demands and to think about Mary's feelings. Whenever I tried to speak up, he'd side with her, leaving me with no choice. Realizing she had her brother on her side, Mary's demands got even worse. She started waking me up at 2 a.m., asking me to go get her ice cream. "The gas station's open, isn't it? Come on, get up," she'd say. I tried to refuse, telling her I needed sleep for work the next day, but she'd run to my husband and tell on me. Every time, I'd end up getting scolded and forced to go out and buy her ice cream in the middle of the night. Mary never cleaned up after herself, never helped around the house, and demanded that I clean her room daily, even though it was originally my room. Eventually, she even started asking me for money. "Sorry, I can't do that. Why don't you ask your brother?" I suggested. Mary was outraged. "I can't believe you're saying no. I'm going to tell my brother you're refusing," she threatened. Though I felt sorry for her situation, I realized that if I gave her money once, she'd keep asking for more. For the first time, I firmly stood up to her. When my husband came home, Mary tearfully accused me of harassing her. "Catherine, why did you make my sister cry?" he demanded. All I did was say no when she asked for money. "She doesn't help with chores at all and treats me like a maid. I'm exhausted. She's been living here over 2 months now. Can't you talk to her about this?" But my husband only got angrier. "If you can't take care of my sister, we're getting a divorce," he declared. I told him this was too extreme, but he wouldn't listen. "There's nothing to discuss. My sister will stay here as long as she wants," he said coldly. I couldn't take it anymore, and we had a huge argument. Mary watched the whole thing, smiling like she was pleased with herself. She was clearly the cause of all this trouble, but I couldn't understand why she was doing it. Then she whispered to me with a chilling smile, "I'm going to make you regret it." I'm Catherine, 27 years old. My life has been tough. My parents divorced when I was young because of my dad's affair. My mom raised me on her own, but she passed away from breast cancer when I was 19. Even though I had friends, I always felt lonely without a family. That changed when I met my husband, Bob. After a year together, we got married 3 years ago. The excitement from the beginning of our marriage has faded, but I've been grateful to have a family. Lately, things have become difficult. Bob lost interest in his job and quit to work only part-time, just 3 days a week. On top of that, his sister, Mary, came into our lives. Mary was already married and living abroad when Bob and I got married, so I never met her. My mother-in-law always described her as kind and considerate, so I was shocked when she turned out to be so selfish and demanding. One day, I came home to find Mary holding a bunch of cash with a grin on her face. It looked like more money than Bob could have given her. When I asked where she got it, she casually said, "I sold some bags and jewelry I found in the bedroom." I was horrified. "Wait, you mean my room?" She just shrugged, laughing as I rushed to check my closet. Sure enough, my mother's heirloom bags and jewelry were gone. "Why would you sell my things?" I asked, furious. "Because you wouldn't give me any money," she said, shrugging. "So, clearly, you didn't need them." I demanded to know where she sold them, and she told me it was at a thrift shop nearby. I hurried to the shop to try and buy them back, but the store had a rule: only the person who sold the items could reclaim them, unless there was proof they were stolen. Without proof, there was nothing I could do. Filled with anger and a burning desire for revenge, I decided I needed to figure out how to deal with Mary. I tried to keep calm, and for the next week, I endured her demands and Bob's anger whenever I stood up for myself. Finally, the tension reached a breaking point. Mary treated me like a maid yet again, and my patience wore thin. That night, Bob and I got into another argument. "I can't go on like this," I told him. "If you don't treat my sister better, maybe we should get divorced," he shot back. It seemed like Bob thought bringing up divorce would make me stay silent and obey, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. As usual, Bob looked down at me arrogantly, with Mary standing beside him, laughing. Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my mother-in-law. "Long time no see, Catherine. Can I come in?" she greeted. "I'm happy you're here. Please come in," I said, noticing Bob's expression darken, while Mary looked far from pleased. "Oh, I didn't know you had a friend over," my mother-in-law commented when she saw Mary. "What are you talking about? She's your daughter, isn't she?" I said, surprised. My mother-in-law looked confused. "Oh, stop joking. Mary just had her second child. She even sent me photos recently." She then took out her phone and showed a picture of the real Mary, still happily married overseas. The woman claiming to be Mary looked nothing like her. As Mary tried to slip away, my mother-in-law stopped her and asked, "Who are you?" "Well, I'm a friend," the woman stammered, while Bob tried to cover for her, saying, "Yeah, she's my friend." It was obvious they were lying, and I decided to expose them. "So, you're not Mary. I suspected something was off. You must be Bob's mistress." The woman denied it, but I showed my mother-in-law a video of her and Bob getting comfy in our living room. Bob tried to grab the laptop, but I stopped him. "What is this? You'd better have a good explanation," my mother-in-law demanded. I explained everything to her, telling her that Bob had let this woman stay in our house for over 2 months, pretending she was Mary. He said it was because she had gone through a tough divorce and lost custody of her child. But it didn't stop there. This woman had even sold my mother's heirlooms at a thrift shop for cash. The footage showed her gleefully talking about making money from the heirlooms and suggesting they go out and have fun with it. "How could you do such a terrible thing?" my mother-in-law asked, horrified. I explained that the thrift shop could only return the items to the person who sold them, so they were still there. Turning to the woman, I said, "You're Megan Foster, aren't you?" She tried to deny it, but I revealed my final piece of evidence. "You might not know this, but I'm the manager of the thrift shop. I wasn't there when you sold my mother's things, but I verified the id of the person who sold them. That's how I knew you weren't my sister-in-law." To make sure my mother-in-law could see the truth, I had invited her over by getting tickets for a concert she wanted to attend. She had no idea what was going on, and now everything was clear. "I'm sorry for asking you to come without explaining everything," I said. "That's okay. I understand it's hard to talk about this," my mother-in-law replied. "But how did you manage to get the video?" I didn't want my things being sold without my permission, so I set up hidden cameras and light bulbs around the house. I had a feeling this woman might be more than just a friend, but I wasn't expecting this, I explained. Sure enough, the video showed her and Bob getting close when I wasn't around. Seeing it was a shock, and though Bob and I had been fighting a lot, I wasn't prepared to see him cheating. "Man, it was this woman. She manipulated me," Bob stammered. "How could you say that? You lied, called her your sister, and let her live here. What were you thinking?" my mother-in-law replied angrily. His mistress then snapped, "Don't blame me. I pretended to be your sister because I'd be thrown out if anyone knew we were having an affair. Besides, you're the one who suggested using your wife as a housemaid, saying that if you divorced her over marital issues, you wouldn't have to pay alimony." Hearing that made me furious. His mistress turned to him, "Now that your marriage is falling apart, why don't we just get divorced and live happily together?" I took out divorce papers I had already signed. "If that's what you want, let's end this," I said, handing them to Bob. Suddenly, he panicked. "Wait, don't rush this. I don't want to lose you. Please, let it go just this once." He backed on his knees. Meanwhile, his mistress pleaded, "Bob, you won't leave me, will you? I have nowhere else to go." Bob pushed her away, ignoring her completely. As she broke down, I spoke up, "Don't worry, you'll have a place to go." "Ah," she asked, confused. "The police are on their way. I reported you for stealing and selling my belongings," I explained. Hearing sirens in the distance, she finally apologized. "I'm so sorry. I've learned my lesson. I won't do it again." If apologies were enough, we wouldn't need the police, I said as the officers arrived. They took her away, and Bob stared in shock, then fell to his knees again. "Please, don't leave me," he begged. "Your salary is higher than mine, and I wouldn't make it on my own. You have to manage and you'll be working more than 3 days a week now, especially with alimony payments." "I'll pay the alimony, but can't we find a way to avoid a divorce?" Bob pleaded. "No, my mind is made up. Sign the divorce papers," I insisted. With some urging from my mother-in-law, Bob finally signed them. "About the alimony, can't you take it from our shared assets?" he asked. "We don't have any shared assets," I replied. "You may have some savings, but I've been covering most of our living expenses, so I'm actually at a loss here." Bob looked pale, realizing the financial situation. My mother-in-law and I then showed him to the door. After he left, we felt a bit sad, but that night, we shared some drinks and talked openly, feeling closer than ever. Later, I got my mother's heirloom bags and jewelry back, now with solid proof they had been stolen. The divorce went through quickly. I also demanded $20,000 each in alimony from Bob and his mistress. Bob was disowned by his in-laws and broke up with his mistress, who was released from jail but kept arguing with him. My mother-in-law checked in on me often, and through this experience, our bond only grew stronger. 3 years later, I stood in a chapel wearing a wedding dress, holding the hand of the man who had been waiting for me. As we exchanged vows, I felt a tear of happiness run down my cheek.